Your arrest made headlines around the world, but you'll probably understand for some of my listeners here in the UK, they need a slight update of where we find ourselves. Can you just go into a little bit more detail, Mr. Khan, of the circumstances in your arrest last month?
Well, for your listeners, what is happening in Pakistan right now is that PTI, which is my party, which I started 27 years ago, is now by far the most popular party in the country. Out of the 37 by-elections in the last few months, we won 30 of them. And all the opinion polls say that we are way ahead of all the other parties. So unfortunately, what has happened is that the military establishment, which the previous army chief removed me from government, and he claimed it later on, he openly claimed it, that it was he who removed me. Since then, there is a sort of, even when the new army chief came, they have decided that whatever happens, I cannot come back into power. So in order to stop me from coming to power, what they have done is they have had various cases, almost 150 cases on me in the last few months to somehow get me disqualified. And then a lot of cases on my senior leadership. But what happened on that fateful day on 9th of May was that I was on bail. There was no way anyone could arrest me. And I was sitting in the High Court when it was like a commando action. It was not the police, but the army. And I could have just I wasn't going to put up a fight against these commandos.
No.
So they just barged in, destroyed the room which I was sitting in. They broke the windows, and then they took me as if I was some sort of a criminal, well, worse, even a terrorist. So that created a reaction.
So for people listening to this, they remember the time that you successfully led your country. Why the disconnect now between you, your party, and the military?
Do you know, I'm not sure. I mean, there are two or three things I think that the army chief, because, army is entrenched in Pakistan. It's ruled directly or indirectly in the last 70 years. So I had a good working relationship. There were things I disagreed with him because I wanted, to bring the powerful mafias under the law. And somehow that's where we differed, because later on, I discovered that he had very good relationship with these political mafias. And so he was not interested. So that's one point of departure we had. And then there were certain foreign policy issues, which was none of his business, because I was the elected prime minister, and foreign policy in consultation with the Foreign Office was my jurisdiction. And so somehow he disagreed with some of my foreign policy decisions, and he decided to change horses. So he then backed who's now the prime minister, who was under trial for billions of rupees of corruption cases. So he backed him, and together they just toppled the government.
In one of your most recent tweets, you write, "We are now living in the dark ages. Nazi Germany-era law of kin punishment being practiced against PTI, the party you founded in 1996. You go on, in other countries where this barbaric law was imposed, totalitarian states like Stalin's Russia, North Korea, and China during the Cultural Revolution. Is what's happening in Pakistan akin to like the Cultural Revolution or North Korea, Mr. Khan?"
It's unprecedented, the crackdown that has been enforced on my political party is just unprecedented. 10,000 of my workers have been put inside. And as we speak, anyone who's a sympathizer or a worker, they break into their houses and they pick them up. But worse, and most of my leadership who's not in prison, or my office bearers who are not in prison, are hiding. So when they don't find them in their houses, they go and grab their relatives. Women, never have women been, there's a respect for women in our country, but never have they been treated like this. So the women, sisters are are sort of harassed. Their husbands, the in-laws are picked up. It's just, it's so draconian. I mean, it really is. We are back to, as I say, the dark ages where we only used to hear these things in Nazi Germany, and where you have collective punishment, where one family member is missing, they would just then pick up the whole family. But
Well,
this is what's happening here.
well, let's step outside Pakistan and look at global reaction. You'll be aware in the United Kingdom, our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says of your arrest, quotes, "It's an internal matter for Pakistan." How disappointed are you? But what I'm going to say, Mr. Khan, is a lack of global action.
You know, the global action, while the Western countries profess to have what are called the Western values, which is democracy, rule of law, constitutionalism, they are against custodial torture, back fundamental rights of the citizens, human rights, all are being violated in Pakistan right now. Pakistan's democracy is being rolled back. The verdicts of the Supreme Court are not listened to. The Supreme Court, according to the Constitution, had announced elections in Pakistan on 14th of May in the biggest province. The government refused. So we now do not have any rule of law in this country. It's might is right. And so when I say, you know, when I say that the Western countries there's no response from them, the reason is that I think the foreign policy of the countries, the ties with the people, the countries they are dealing with, I think that's how they respond. So in China, in Hong Kong, the Uyghurs in China, or in what's happening in Russia, that all gets highlighted of lack of human rights. They'll talk about lack of democracy and so on. But what is happening in Pakistan is just not highlighted, because I think they have a very good relationship with the military here.
And what of the United States? No real reaction from President Biden. Would you hope for a change of personnel at the top in the forthcoming US elections? Who would you want to win that, Mr. Khan?
Well, look, you know, I'm a firm believer that countries only change from within. You can't change countries from outside. But what should happen is, and I repeat, the professed values of the Western countries, democracy and constitutional and human rights, at least they should speak about this, and they should speak about those violations. At least custodial torture, I mean, it's banned everywhere in the Western world, and yet it's happening in Pakistan.
But they've deserted you, Mr. Khan. These leaders have deserted you.
You're talking about my leaders or the Western leaders?
No, other Western leaders. I'm sorry, Mr. Khan. These Western leaders, well, they're very happy to meet with you when you're in power. You're in need now. Your colleagues are being arrested. It does sound akin to Nazi Germany, and yet there seems total silence from the West, Mr. Khan.
Do you know, my experience of international politics, my 3.5 years in power, I mean in government, I realized that, you know, actually, all leaders are very pragmatic. In the end, they've, you know, no matter what principles they profess and whatever democratic values they stand for, in the end, they decide what is good for their country or not. For instance, when Kashmir, in Indian Kashmir, when they took away the statehood of the people of Kashmir, violating the United Nations Security Council resolution, and they took away the statehood, and this clampdown, exactly a crackdown, even much worse than this, took place, where they just completely, there was a curfew. There was hardly, I called up the Western leaders, I was in power then, I called them up. I said, look, at least condemn what's going on. But they didn't, because, you know, India is an ally, and an ally against China. So there was absolutely no response. So I'm quite, you know, I had no expectations really, because I think that they have a good relationship with this current government and the military, because this is basically, it's a military-backed government now, because the moment the military withdraws its support, this government will collapse.
We've talked a lot about you and the colleagues in your party. How is day-to-day life for the average Pakistan citizen at the moment, Mr. Khan? Allowing, of course, for those terrible floods we witnessed last year, and I understand inflation as well, Mr. Khan.
Well, in 1 year, just to give you an idea, when we left, growth rate in Pakistan was 6.1%. It is one of the best performing economy in Pakistan's history because that's 6.1 and 6% average growth rate in 2 years, last 2 years of our government. Plus, we had handled COVID-19. We were given, as an example of a country, top 3 countries that handled the COVID-19 crisis very well. So from that point, we now have, our growth has collapsed to 0.3%. Inflation, when we were, and you remember there was this commodity super cycle, so the inflation was around global inflation. Pakistan, our inflation then was 12.4%. Today is 38%. So unemployment is, industry has gone into we had 10.4% growth in our large-scale manufacturing industry. That's gone into negative. Exports 15% down, remittances 15% down. In other words, dollar income has gone down. And yet at the same time, our debt has increased. Economy has never been as bad as in 75 years of our history. So when you combine the two, a crackdown, a complete collapse of rule of law, and at the same time, the economy tanking, we are in the worst possible situation right now, which is why the government is petrified of elections, because this is election year.
I want to ask you
the
about
reason they are clamping down on the party is because support has grown.
Well, I want to ask you about that, and there was a bump on the line, so I just want to say.
So I was going to say that the reason why.
I think there's a slight delay. Sorry, Mr. Governor.
Sorry,
we'll work through this. I just want to get your point out there that inflation is now running at 38%. I'm going to ask you the question. You say, of course, you are in an election year. Those elections are due in October of this year. Mr. Khan, how likely are they that they'll go ahead?
In October, if they think that my party is crushed, PTI, the party is crushed, is not enfeebled, is not able to contest elections, and I'm in jail because, as I said, there are 150 cases. Sooner or later, they will shove me in jail. So if they feel that we are not capable of winning, only then there will be elections.
What about your own personal safety? There was an attempt on your life late last year. Do you live in fear? I think we've lost the connection.
Well, I mean, I'm conditioned, really. There've been about 3. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Khan. I'll repeat the question. Do you live in... There have been assassination attempts on your life, one as recently as November. Do you live in fear of your life?
I have one attempt where I had 3 bullets in my leg on November 3. I escaped another assassination attempt, which was on the 18th of March. I was very lucky, really, to get out alive. And as I said, there's so many cases against me. They've tried to come to arrest me illegally. Once they came to my house, my house was under attack for 24 hours, where my workers, and like they abducted me from the Supreme Court, from the High Court. So therefore, I mean, I'm mentally prepared that sooner or later they'll put me in jail.
One final question, because the line is starting to deteriorate. What keeps you going? What keeps you so resolved, Mr. Khan?
Just to add that, the reason why I think they will jail me is now because in the regular courts, none of the cases against me stand, so I get bail. So now they've brought in military courts, and they will try me in the military courts, and that's how it keeps me going is that, there's a huge expectation from the I have right now. So, I mean, apart from anything else, there's no way I'm going to let all these people down. Because right now, all my leadership is in jail or hiding. All workers are hiding. I'm the only one out right now. And I'm not allowed.
If you can hear me, it's been a privilege speaking with you, Mr. Khan. I fear we've lost the line, but thank you if you can hear me. Thank you very much. I think he's gone.
Oh, he's coming back.
Sorry.
Mr. Khan, can
Sorry, did you hear me?
Okay, let's try that last question one last time. Sorry, just to make sure, sir. Can you hear me, Mr. Khan?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the final question, yes, here we go. I know you're busy. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. What keeps you going, Imran Khan? What is your personal determination or resolution to fight against everything that appears to be being thrown at you?
Well, I started my party 27 years ago called Movement for Justice. And let me say, I was inspired by, as a teenager going to Britain, first time I saw rule of law. So I always wanted, my assessment is that countries are poor only because they don't have rule of law. And the countries that have rule of law have very high standard of living because they attract investment and so on a level playing field. So that was my struggle 27 years ago. And right now, I'm on that brink now where the public for the first time understands exactly what I mean by rule of law. Because if you've never had rule of law, you don't understand that actually freedom and democracy and prosperity understand, and the public is standing with me. And so therefore, I will go right to the end. Whether it is a risk to my life or whether I go to prison, there's no way I will, now abandon this mission because I never needed politics. I came in because I felt that I was privileged. I had a big name. I had love and respect in this country, and I should do my duty to the country. So it's the journey I started, mission I started 27 years back.
All right. I think the line's gone again. I'm very grateful. Thank Mr. Khan, if you can hear me again, thank you very much. You look after yourself. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank
Khan.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.